Hey guys, we're back for stream number 2 and we'll go for a couple of hours, see how we get on until batteries run out. I've swapped the battery for the phone. My stabilizer hopefully will last another couple of hours, so let's get around. Sometimes we have good conversations a bit later in the evening, like now it's 6 o'clock now, so let's go and have a look and see. And we've got a gentleman here who's taking a nice look.
I love your gear. Your gear is cool. Sure, yeah. Awesome.
Here again with Jamie. Yeah, Jamie, live. How you doing?
Hey.
Okay, but what we say? You know, Ali, no, can we mention something? What was our point? Ali, what was our point?
Yep. Golden superstars in here today. Reverend Simon Sideways in the building. Yeah. Sorry?
What Gary's talking about.
So, we're talking about Khawarij, like the Islamic extremists. And he was saying about Omar was being racist to me, it's caught on camera. And then Adnan Rashid, his teacher, never done anything about it.
Especially with hijab, he's been
That's not violent. Yeah. I told him before. I said,
goes around trying to fight with gumshoes in his mouth.
Not anymore.
No, basically, I know he don't do it anymore because he's learned. I'm just surprised this guy didn't know this before. He's read the Quran. It says Muhammad came here to perfect good character. Yes? So I'm surprised this guy's gone around challenging people to fight.
See, my brother,
that makes sense.
see what I'm saying? If you deal with the people rightly, you're going to get a different approach from them.
100%.
I was rightly, my brother.
100% look.
That's why I said we're not enmity.
So the thing is, what he's saying is right. Gary said this before on camera as well about good character. And I told him, I said, look.
And Zacharias.
Come on.
Why he doesn't even do it?
You don't mind, Gary.
I'm kind of muted in there.
Well, we're going to talk about atheism.
No, go on, man. I was only here listening in, man.
Speak. Are you not offending the part? Speak. There's nothing wrong with you not speaking the part. You've seen us as Muslims, innit? Tell them you've seen us.
But what it is, the other person I want you to correct though is Rashid for his racism.
No, we have to clarify that.
Okay, you want me to show you? Let's show you.
One second, let's stick to it.
Why do we call it
Look,
work?
if
Break it down.
somebody's just,
It's on camera.
if somebody's just, when you say thug elements, you will not only bring Muslims in. If you said to me, they've done mistakes, I'll say to you, know what, there's this brother, and also this other individuals who are not Muslim who have done it, but all you've done is you just mentioned 3 Muslims, and you've made it seem like they were the root cause of it, and everything grew from there. No, it didn't. Now hijab, he's not violent.
Okay.
He's not violent.
Let's have a look at the racism. Callum was here. Right. Can we all agree this on camera? This is racism. Can we agree white people blacking out their faces is racism? Yes. Can we agree? How many people don't think it's racism?
Yes.
Is this racism? We got Darky Day.
I believe it.
We got Darky Day down in Cornwall.
Really?
Yes. You never heard of Darky Day? When they all black out their faces.
Serious?
Yes. This is the dark.
What's the reason? What's the purpose?
Right. So the purpose of the video is here it is here. So we agree this is racism all around. Now this is Rashid. Right. This is the video when Callum is talking to Rashid.
No, but you're just
This is the title of the video. Quote unquote, bro. You got a chance to fact check it. Right.
No, but
Callum, remember.
Your statement is not true until it's verified.
Present is Rashid, Sheikh, and Hijab, and Callum. The question is being asked. Callum says this. You could be an Asian, you could be white, you could be whatever colour you are, and you can take the Kemet philosophy and apply it in your life. Quote unquote. Right. This is the question that Rashid put to him. Can a white woman say she's practicing Kemet version wrong? This is Rashid asking Callum. Callum says no, unless she wants to play some evidence and say why. Rashid's reply to that is, unless she paints herself black.
Yeah.
Is that racism?
No.
So for a white woman
why
to
is that
take on
racism?
Kemet philosophy,
That's not
all
racism.
she has to do is paint. I know you can't see it.
No,
Is that racism?
That's not
Does anybody say for
But
a
because
white
you're
woman
biased
to
one
take
second.
on a black philosophy,
second.
all she has to do is paint her face black?
Okay, 1 second. If I was speaking to a Chinese person,
But these people fought the same
Okay,
thing
can
as
I-
you,
can I-
Ali. Look,
okay, can
here
I-
they are
can I-
here.
can I make
The
my
Ku Klux Klan fought
let me know when you finish. Yeah?
just by painting somebody black, yes? Painting a white person black is this racism, Ali?
Yeah.
This is racism.
Yeah.
But Rashid thinks a white person blacking out is now a black person.
Nope.
So what is okay? So what
Let me
did
know
Rashid
anything.
mean by if she paints her so black, she can now take on the Kemet philosophy?
Okay, so if I was talking to somebody who had an ideology of, you know, the Chinese history, and they believe that they were the first to come here, and I got a vibe that they're acting upon basically that you have to be Chinese or from a Chinese background to be one of like the chosen ones or the ones that are better than everyone else. Now, if I said, oh, so are you telling me that for me to do that, I have to look Chinese? Yeah, I have to look Chinese. That's not racist. That's me confirming to him, are you telling me I need to look Chinese or I need to look at it this way or that way to do that? So there, he believes, Adnan believes that Kalam is racist. That's what he believes. So he's saying to join the Kemet, what do you need to do? Paint yourself black, like be black. That's it. So the thing
Hold on a
is,
second.
don't compare,
Ali,
you're comparing
Ali, you're missing
two
the point.
separate things.
You're missing a point. The argument was,
Two
can
separate
a
things.
white person take on the Kemet philosophy?
Yes.
Callum said no, unless she can show the evidence. Rashid said, unless she paints herself black. Now we know a white person painting herself black has connotations of racism.
So do you,
Yes?
do you really believe he meant
No,
literally paint
because
himself?
it has connotation of racism because this is why we have Darky Day in Cornwall, where you got white people running around the town
Relevant
with their
connection.
face blacked out. We've got the Black and White Minstrel Show. Who's old enough to remember the Black and White Minstrel Show? With white people, entertainers, painting themselves black. We got people who are being hung with their faces painted black. Yes? And you don't speak. So you find
You're comparing
a white
apples
person
to the universe.
No, but listen.
Not even bananas.
Listen, Rashid knew straight away what he meant when he says all she has to do to follow an African philosophy is to paint her face black.
Or in other words,
that's
become black.
racist.
No.
No. Painting her face black.
Sorry,
no,
Gary.
No.
Gary.
Painting her face black
False
means
equivalence.
becoming black. That's what they mean.
How are you using white people painting themselves black to start Adnan Rashid
Somebody-
believing someone's
somebody
racist and
portraying
believes
themselves
that
as
someone has to become a black
Okay,
to
a
do that?
racist person betraying themselves as
Gary,
black
don't try it.
will black out their face.
Gary, please. Be just. We're talking
Am I
about
right or wrong,
we're
Callum?
talking about justice here, yeah?
I've missed a lot of it.
Right.
So
We're being justice. So
No,
let's be
we're not
just,
being
yeah?
just.
We are.
So I'm saying to
I
you,
am.
that
But
is
I
the
know
racism
you're
of
using
Rashid.
false equivalent
Right.
to say you start Adnan Rashid. You know he's not racist. You know
He
he's
is
not.
racist.
And that's what.
Okay.
That's what.
Would you like more example of
this
racism?
person here
Listen.
on my left, he was
Listen.
dying to find out if
Listen.
Islam's racist. He did
Listen.
his research
Hold on.
and he came back
Listen.
upset because he realized Islam is
listen,
not. And that's why he's upset.
Rashid is your teacher. So I understand
He's one
that
of
you
my
have
teachers, yes.
loyalties to Rashid's cause.
No, I don't have loyalties. I
Yes,
have
you
loyalty
do. He's
to
your
Allah and
teacher.
His Messenger.
No, you're your
I have
teacher.
loyalty to Allah and His
No,
Messenger.
you have loyalties to Rashid.
So if he comes, if he's clear cut racist, you think I'm going to back him up?
No,
No,
hold on a second.
sorry. My
But you
religion
was- hold on a
and my
second.
prophet come
But
first.
it took you weeks to understand
No,
that
it
Omar was
didn't.
racist.
No, it didn't.
Yes, it
How
did.
do you know?
It took you weeks.
How do you know?
It took you weeks to understand.
How do you know?
Hold on, Ali.
How do you know it didn't take me 2 days? How do you take me 2 days?
The racism in Libya. Look
How
how
do
long
you know
it
it
took you
took
to
me 2
work that
days?
one out.
No, it didn't.
Look how long it took you
I
to work
did
out the
my-
racism
I had
in
to do
Libya.
my research.
No, you didn't.
I'm not just going to jump on board.
There was
And where
clear-cut
was you?
evidence in
Where
racism.
was you at the
I
protest?
was at the march.
No, you wasn't.
I was at the march.
I was there,
You
you
wasn't
wasn't
there. I didn't see you there.
But when I was there, you wasn't there.
Well, you wasn't there. I was
Yeah,
there
yeah,
first.
yeah. I was there last.
So, in summary,
It's when you finish the race. It's not how when you started.
Rashid is racist, and I want you to talk to your
You
elder.
wish.
2018. Nobody talks about racism, guys.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
all
And
the
it-
same.
okay,
They want
well,
Islam
okay,
to be racist.
okay. So like we're all the same. Now I dare you to hang around the House of the Parliament for a couple of hours and we see.
Gary,
who's
I'm
racist
going to
or
go
not.
there. That's not racist.
Politicians, but
You
Hang
have
around
to
the House
bring
of the
evidence.
Parliament, see what happens.
fuck them.
What's going to happen in
Ali,
the
you
Parliament? What's the point? We're going to talk back and forth. It's
Rashid
Ramadan.
is racist.
I'm fasting. I need to use
Rashid
my
is
voice
racist.
productively.
Bring him here and let
Productively.
me deal with him.
No, you're lying. It's a lie. You didn't bring no evidence.
Face to face.
You never bring no evidence.
Rashid is racist. Bring him here. Ali, one more thing. Ali,
Yeah, leave this guy alone.
Ali, one more thing. No, one more thing. Here it is. Could you give this to Rashid? Because this is the world that Rashid sees. Could you give it to Rashid?
Come on, man.
Come here, please. This is the world of Rashid. This is the world of Rashid.
We're
Can you
all
give
bro-
this to him?
We're
Yeah.
all brothers, man. Fuck that. Right or not?
Thank you.
See that, Gaza? I didn't see that. What is
Bro.
that, Gaza? I didn't see that.
This is the world of Rashid.
Fuck that, man. Fuck.
That's the world of Rashid.
Fuck every racist person in here.
Imitating the Ku
We all
Klux Klan.
brothers, bro.
I don't give a damn.
We all haven't
Pulling
committed
him out,
suicide,
that's the
man. We
person
all
that's been
haven't committed suicide.
because under the radar for several years here. Yeah, we focus on Omar and people like that. Rashid is under the radar. I'm going to pull him out on it. And if he's a man, come in front of me and let's debate it. That's my challenge to Rashid.
Who's this guy?
Yeah, but you won't come over here. You won't get, if I go over there now, you run off.
tried going over there?
I've tried it several times. We run off.
Say something.
Pull him out, bro. Pull him out. Yes? Rob, would you agree? We'll dump it on camera. Would you agree?
Next Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah. Everyone's going to be there too. Who's this handsome gentleman? Stop filming anyone. Live streaming.
Tell me one road where there's a blocked out Muslims praying. No, but just tell me what it is. I don't know where they're going. Okay, so let's say that does happen. Okay, let's say that does happen. Why is that so disruptive if people are quietly praying? But is it happening in Russia? I mean, I don't know when the prayer is happening. I mean, is it happening?
I've seen someone block out a road just to pray in a beautiful DC road. When does that happen?
I don't think there's enough space to be in London roads to be So what else other than the praying, just getting in the way?
Which one? The black one? But they've been doing it for why are you speaking for the fucking ticket? He's over 40 years old. Why can't you speak for yourself? You're a big man. Why can't you speak? I've given certain people so many chances.
Here we go. Here comes another camera.
I'm assuming that's like nice word.
Oh, you went far.
I'm not entertaining that.
You did, bro. You went personal.
See, that's another version of me looking really good.
Wow. I was right. My character assessment, you know what my sister said 3 months ago when I met him? She said he's one of the worst individuals she's ever seen on camera. She said, don't talk to him. I said, give him a chance. She's been proven right, so thanks, sis.
And then you go, alright, he's that.
Publicly say that's
No, brother, that's nothing. Alright, guys, can I get a census here? If I'm going around saying that I do certain disgusting things in public, okay, and then someone highlights it up, is that my fault? That I said it or that others have said it?
Is it that you do the bad things?
I'm doing the bad things. For example, I'm doing loads of drugs and going around and acting disgusting with women, and then I tell everyone, but then is it my fault or is it people's fault for highlighting that that's what I did? Oh, you're lefty.
He's not the right person.
The jobs.
Mate, if I don't want people to know, I wouldn't tell them. It's as simple as that. Am I right here, there, fella? Yeah, there's a sensible man. Exactly. So stop telling your secret to the world.
You're too intellectual for that. You're too intellectual for this. This is beneath you. This is not for your type of intellect. This is like for the kind of like knuckle
You're number
draggers.
one fans here, G. You're number one fans here.
Oh my god.
You might use condom or not?
I'm not gay. I'm not gay. I'm not gay. And I don't like bald men. So I'll get in a week. So anyone wants to... I'm not getting one like yours. I'll get one like that. What's all this following me about? Like everyone's obsessed with me. Look, how many people are following me?
What am I supposed to do? I'm saying it!
He's run away now, look.
Someone in the way! You had some good conversations.
All on Brexit and black and white issues and things like that.
Not all
religion today. It's ended up a bit with Israel as usual, as normal, the elephant in the room.
Live on the live stream to Speakers Corner UK.
So
how are you, Ian?
Well, I'm Ian, and as you know, I know Rob. I've known Rob now for years, and when I've been coming here quite a long time in my life.
Fantastic atheist's favourite question is, can you show me God?
Correct. Can you show me God this afternoon in Speakers Corner now? That's it.
I've never had a good response to that I'm aware.
I've never actually got the proof. 50 years I've been coming here since a child, and they still never brought God here. So that's the only thing outstanding. If you can bring God, I won't bother coming anymore. That's right. But today we've had a bit of, well, Rob, we've had a bit of politics today, a bit of Brexit, a bit of racial issues between black and white, quite interesting. And it's been all right. And I even spoke to the policeman about football, about standing terraces for the new football season. Amazing. So a bit more. It was a bit quiet before, but it's got better now. That's what was shown to me. But I would never try and persuade you that's true. That was an experience I had. And it's quite shocking.
Yeah, this starts to be racist because I said he's a black.
I know, it's got like...
I'm human, and I'm going to be, and we have to put the same privately. So,
as I'm explaining to you, the Quran lays down and the Sunnah some very strict rules for war. If you're going to war, you don't attack people who are peacefully living in your neighbourhood. You don't initiate interest in war.
Yeah, not if members of your state. That's subject.
You don't initiate war against your neighbours just like that. Yeah, I know. This is nothing to do. What I'm trying to get is to summarise what the Islamic position is, and you don't agree with anything I'm saying.
Yeah, because I've read sources actually from.
Well, you haven't. No, you haven't read any sources.
Yeah, I have.
I don't think so.
Well, I'm able to quote at least one book written by a Qadi of Damascus on jurisprudence.
Oh, you've read one Qadi in Damascus?
You haven't. You aren't able to tell me.
That's not how it works.
Okay, to tell me which specific, imam of the four imams, which disagrees with what I'm saying.
No, you see, the four imams are not. Can you name the four imams?
Yeah, Shafi, Hanbali, Maliki, Hanafi.
Okay. Now, the four schools don't follow faithfully exactly what they taught. Did you know that?
True.
But you see, if you follow the Hanafi fiqh, you're going to get within the Hanafi fiqh, for example, a range of opinions. Let me give an example. Hanafi himself said that there was no death penalty for apostasy, no death penalty for adultery. The had crimes that they didn't apply for the had crimes.
You made that claim before, but I'm not so sure it's true.
Well, it is true. I've seen the original. I've actually got the book by Ibn Hanafi himself at home. But his students, Yusuf and others, disagree with him, and so immediately you had the kind of variety of opinion within the Hanafi fiqh, which is what it's like. You have different views, and the Sharia is an incredibly diverse body of law. There isn't like the Muslim view of hardly anything.
No, but there is the
especially
Salafi view. I was talking about Salafi, remember?
Especially when it. No, you mentioned the four imams.
Yeah, and so they're from the Tabi'in and the Tabi'in. So those are the Salaf. Their students or later generations aren't part of the Salaf. If you are a Salafi who genuinely believes that the form of Islam practiced by the Salaf is the purest and best form of Islam, then you don't care as much what their students say.
That's the Sunni position. That's the Sunni position.
Well, like Salafs in particular, emphasize.
Well, they emphasize it, but that is the Sunni position.
Okay. Well, if you want me to,
that's the position of the four madhabs.
Okay, so
it's not particular to the Salafi. All Muslims, Sunni Muslims, believe that. Obviously, Shia don't. They believe in Ali, etc. So, coming back to this point, there is a diversity of opinion. If you're looking at the behaviour of the Sahaba during their lifetime, when they went to war with the Persians and they went to war with the Byzantines, they didn't initiate unprovoked attack on these two empires. There'd already been, during Muhammad's time, causes for war that were threatening the Muslims in the first place. For example, during Muhammad's time, he'd sent an ambassador to the Persian king, I forget his name, and the king was actually murdered by the Persians. And this was seen as an act of war. And also the Byzantines had threatened, or perceived to have threatened, the Ummah as well in Arabia. And so there already were skirmishes. Muhammad actually took an army all the way up to the frontier because they were expected that the Roman Empire was there to attack them. So already there were skirmishes. These were empires that were seen as a direct existential threat to the Muslims. And when they did fight back and they actually successfully defeated those two empires, they never forced anyone to accept Islam. No one was forced to become a Muslim, not a single soul. What they did do, wonderfully, is that they freed the Christians who were being persecuted by their Byzantine overlords. Remember, the Byzantines were Catholics, if you like, in our terms, and the ordinary people were Orthodox, like modern Orthodox Christians, they're like Copts and Orthodox, who were being oppressed by the Roman Christians, the Byzantines. And they were freed now because of the Muslims to actually practice their faith without persecution. The Jews who were about to be exterminated in the Iberian Peninsula, what we call Spain, were freed. The Judaism survived because of Islam. And there's a wonderful paper written by a Jewish professor, historian in America, who specialised in that. It said, Islam saved Jewry. That's the title of the essay. You can get it on the internet. So in fact, the net effect of the Arab conquests at the time of the Sahaba was liberation and God's justice, and that also that the word of Islam could spread, because it was not allowed to spread because of these empires. So all in all, it was a blooming good thing it happened, and it led to the most marvellous civilization that blossomed after that time, of science, of culture, of technology, of learning. It was we in the West, in Europe, we're in the Dark Ages. The Islamic Empire was the centre of civilization in the world. And this is a direct consequence of the presence of Islam in those countries. And places like Egypt, most of the population weren't Muslim, and they were allowed to continue to be non-Muslim. No one forced them to convert. The thing about Islam spread by the sword is a myth, a historical myth. So, well, I certainly is, according to the historians, but whether it be at London University and so on.
Okay.
So Muslims were not...
I haven't wanted to interrupt you, but you've said so many things that are totally false, because you've given the impression that every single kind of invasion done by Muslims in the Salaf generations, under the Rashidun Caliphate was defensive, but that's clearly not true. So one example would be the Kingdom of Makuria, south of Egypt in Nubia. They had never, there was no records of them performing any attack against Muslim territories, but Muslims still invaded there, tried to attack them twice, and then when they were repelled 2 times, they sought a treaty with them, and the terms of that treaty is known as the Bact, and it's a treaty that lasted 700 years. It was signed in 641, and the terms of that treaty were normal terms like we won't attack you, you won't attack us, we'll do trade together, but also the treaty stipulated that the Muslims were to receive 360 male and female high-quality slaves from the Kingdom of Makuria, and that continued for 700 years, which overall it results in either hundreds of thousands of millions. I can't remember the figure at the moment.
Thousands of millions of what?
Either hundreds of thousands of slaves being kind of either hundreds of thousands of people being slaved and purloined and taken from their homeland, from Makuria to Islam land.
In my life.
Okay, I'll give you.
I'm not denying what you're saying is true. I've never heard of it.
Okay. You can
what I was talking about are the major empires. I was talking about Byzantium. I was talking about the Persian Empire.
You can admit that they weren't solely kind of defending themselves.
No, I'm not admitting or not admitting anything. I'm simply saying I've never heard of this. So it's obviously this is news to me, which is fine. I've learned something. How do you spell the name of the country?
Makuria.
How do you spell it?
M-A-K-U-R. A-I-A. Makuria.
Sorry, M-A-K-U-R. I-A. And what's the next word if there is one? Or is that it?
Kingdom of Makuria. That's
Kingdom.
And it's called the Bact is the treaty.
Oh, Nubians.
Yeah, Nubians. And here are the terms of the treaty.
I'm looking at Wikipedia.
Okay, this is from Wikipedia.
Okay.
It's good to hear Paul saying, "Hey, I don't know. I'm going to look something up." How often?
Well, there are lots of things I don't know.
I know. But at least you're honest to say, "Hey, you don't know, and you're going to look it up." Most people here don't do that.
And it was the battles of Dokuria or something. Can't remember. But basically, the Muslims attacked the Christian kingdom Makuria twice. Okay. Yeah, sorry for not. So this is from Wikipedia as well. This is from Wikipedia as well.
What is the name of it called?
It's called the Bacht. This is the treaty that the Muslims signed with the Christian kingdom in Nubia, in East Africa, which stipulated that they required 360 high-quality slaves a year.
Yeah, this was during peacetime. This was not during the war.
Yeah. This was in order. Yeah, this is in order to end the war. This is the terms of peace.
Oh, I see.
The terms for peace were that, you know, in addition to normal things like, oh, we won't attack each other, we'll be able to trade, we'll be able to have free movement, it also requires that 360 slaves will be transferred to, you know, Muslim lands per year.
Was this the Arab army invaded, but it was repulsed? In other words, they weren't conquered.
Yeah.
So you said they were invaded.
They were invaded. Just
I thought you said they were invaded.
No, I said invaders. Said invaders.
So they weren't invaded. They were repulsed.
No. But if you go into someone's territory, then get kicked out again, you've still invaded.
Well, it doesn't say that. It said that they were repulsed. Okay, maybe we're cribbing. But
they tried to attack and conquer.
They weren't successfely conquered.
Well, they tried to anyway.
They tried to. Okay. All right.
And so I think that's.
I'm just nuancing what we're saying here.
Okay. Yeah, it's as part of the terms of the peace treaty. It was the Bacht. And so, if you honestly accept, if you truly have this idea,
I'm just reading up.
Yeah. But the consequence of this is that if you truly believe that the Islam of the so-called rightly guided caliphs and the Islam of the Salaf is the best and most ideal example to follow, then you wouldn't be able to condemn this flagrant act of aggression.
No, you see, you're making assumptions that it was a flagrant act. I mean,
it was.
Okay, but that's your view. I've not come across it before. I'm just beginning to learn. There's a whole bunch of texts here. I've yet to. You said I must agree. Actually, you haven't given me 5 seconds to actually appraise myself of this before I can agree with your judgment. Because so far you said they were invaded. Okay. Now I read the invasion was successfully repulsed. Then I read there is no copy of the treaty in existence. And so I'm just reading through the stuff here. I mean, we would need to.
Satisfied. If after learning about this invasion of Makuria and the Bacht, you were satisfied that it was.
Might not have been written at all. If you were Wikipedia, it might just have been a verbal agreement.
No, I mean, it still occurs.
So, I'm just reading what it says on Wikipedia.
No. Even if there is no extant version of the treaty, that doesn't justify this kind of extreme skepticism that maybe like it was made up or it's like revisionism or something like that. You know, we'll be able to find.
I would need to look this up, which is fine. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. But I just want to say, hang on. I just want to say that when you triumphantly declare that I must now agree, I think this is a bit arrogant, a very premature, because I've not had the time to study this. And now you've reached your conclusion. I may reach a different conclusion. I've already noted, in fact, that there was no successful invasion. There is no documentary evidence for this. But it looks like there may have been an oral agreement. Exactly. So, but I'm already seeing reasons, just by a very cursory, brief glance, that in fact things are not so clear-cut as you were triumphantly proclaiming them to be. So I would need to pause to go home, and not here because it's not a place for study, and look at this. But I do maintain that the things we do know about, the big beasts of the two empires and the Iberian Peninsula and so on, contrary to the myths that prevail, no one was forced to convert to Islam. And in fact, the Muslims brought liberation to many peoples in the Levant and North Africa. And this was the bed from that foundation from which a great civilization, which is much more advanced than anything in Europe for 1,000 years, and Europe, and it actually triggered the Renaissance in Europe. It fed directly into the Renaissance in learning, because obviously the Islamic learning fed into the rebirth of knowledge in Europe. So it directly had an impact on European civilization as well, as we know from the scientific manuals that were used.
Does this mean that we can't criticise the conduct of the Salaf and the Sahaba and the four Imams?
I'm simply saying that the negative
seems a little bit
the negative angle you have is it's more likely that we're doing very positive human achievements. I don't think the Salaf were anything like you say, bloodthirsty aggressors or whatever you claim.
What I'd really love an authoritative source which states that, contrary to my book of Islamic jurisprudence.
You're looking at just one book. Is that the only
No, I've done like googling into other books of jurisprudence. Yeah, I've read an English translation of the authoritative, most sound, agreed upon positions of the Shafi school called the Reliance of the Traveller.
Yeah, you're aware that the Shafi school is different from the other three schools?
In what sense?
Well, are you aware of that difference?
Tell me, because
I'm asking you. Are you aware of an important difference that the Salafi madhab has on precisely this issue of expansionist jihad, if you like? This idea of, are you aware of the difference that Shafi had from the other three schools?
Well, they all have differences. Can you be? They all have differences.
No, on the idea of expansion.
Just saying there is a difference. It's a bit vague. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
Yeah, because you need to tell me what difference you're talking about.
Well, on this issue of defensive and expansionist or offensive jihad, the Salafi school, the Shafi school, for understanding, has a much more kind of expansionist perspective than the other three do. You mentioned the Reliance of the Traveller. Yes. That's a very good example of that. The Hanafi school today, which is the dominant madhab in the world, doesn't view jihad as permissible in expansionist terms. You merely go out with your armies. That's not how the Hanafi dominant, the wide Maswali followed school today sees things. The Shafi has a different. Well, you see, Islam is not just based. You see, this is why it's perilous for someone like you and someone like me just to merely go into this as amateurs, because when you Islamic scholars who issue. The mujtahid, and the people who formulate fatwas and so on. You've got to know Arabic, which I assume, do you know Arabic? Right, okay, that's one thing. You've got to know all the sources. You've got to know the Quran well, you've got to know the Seerah well, the biography of the Prophet, you've got to know the Hadith well, and you've got to know the Sahaba well, and you've got to know the existing jurisprudential position on these subjects as well. You've got to really be an expert on all of these to be able to formulate a view which is consonant in harmony, but your focus on Sahaba, as if this is what Islam is about. It doesn't quite work like that. And that's not what the Salafis don't talk like that either. They talk about it's the Quran and it's the Sunnah and it's the Salaf and it's the four madhabs. So you don't have that rounded, informed engagement with all the sources to understand the different madhabs and how they think about the rules of engagement, the rules of war, for example, and when you can't attack an enemy, and what you do when you do attack them, how you don't attack women and children and elderly and so on. So ISIS are obviously out of the picture.
You're claiming that I don't know about it. But
do you have all those skills to formulate an opinion on this? Well, you say you read a paperback and you Google stuff on the internet, which is very meritable, but that's not really what it takes.
Well, so far I've presented evidence from an actual jurist who's done comparative study on the four school of. Well, you didn't want to read it. You said, oh, I don't need to see your book. I already know that's blah blah blah. Do you want to see it now? Do you want to see evidence? Do you want to make this a discussion about specific evidence?
Well, not particularly. No, you
okay. So
because when I've read books on this, when you read a range of scholars, not just one paperback, and you read different schools of thought, you come to the conclusion that you're not basing Islam on an opinion of one man who wrote one paperback. You're aware of a great diversity of opinion, not just one paperback.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about Islam
and that's why that paperback doesn't prove anything.
I'm talking about the belief that the Islam practiced by the Salaf is the purest and best form of Islam in existence, and that the consensus of the four Imams is authoritative. And I've looked at actual evidence of what the four Imams believe. You say.
What are we talking about, by the way?
Well, the initial example I brought to you was about making war.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, the four Imams believe that. I'll read directly from the four Imams.
So start from Hanafi first.
Okay, well, I'm reading a book written by Al-Qadi As-Safadi, who was the head jurist in Damascus in, I think, 1400 or something like that.
Well, it is one man's opinion, okay.
Okay, well...
There are lots of jurists with lots of opinions. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, think you've learned Islam because you found a 14th century jurist.
Please tell me a text that disagrees with me then, that's more
there are lots of texts that disagree. You see, jurists disagree with each other, have many opinions. I'll send you a list.
Okay, that's great.
What I'm saying is the methodology here. To put all your eggs in one basket of a 14th century Damascene scholar
is not what Muslims do. We don't rush to this text. We rush to a variety of scholars and scholarly fatwas and so on over the centuries. We don't go to one guy. Now, there are some eccentric voices, some oddball voices, the oddball scholars who say weird and wacky things.
He's not regarded as an oddball.
What? How do you know?
Because I've read reviews of the book.
What, by his contemporaries?
By publishing houses.
No, by Muslims.
Yeah, Muslims who run publishing houses who will have studied this themselves.
Well, I'm saying there are, nonetheless, oddball scholars. We just don't go to any scholar. No, I'm just giving
I appreciate you don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of like the writings of the four imams off your head now. So I don't think this will be a productive conversation unless we like actually get with the empirical evidence. So maybe we should postpone this for a bit later.
We're talking about the Quran.
We're talking about what the four imams believed and what they advocated. Because it says here, they agree that the people of every frontier must fight the unbelievers close to them. So I'd like you to find evidence that the four imams specifically do not agree with that.
No, you see, he's not quoting the four imams, is he?
He's not directly quoting them. He's saying what they believe based on their writings.
You see, he is saying that about the four imams. I happen to know that in Islamic military jurisprudence, you don't attack countries that you have treaties with. How do I know that? How do I know that? Because the Quran teaches that.
That's not a direct contradiction, though. Like obviously, accepting those that you have treaties. No, later on though, it mentions treaties in this book. Okay.
You see that quote? You see, doesn't mention treaties.
But
it gives an immediate impression that you just attack everyone who's not a Muslim. That's not the Islamic position. It never has been. It's a misleading quote. That's what you need to talk about.
No, it's not misleading if you read the whole chapter.
Give me quotes where it talks about the treaties. Because it is wrong to say that Islam has ever taught that you just attack non-believers. The Quran doesn't say that. In Surah number 9, verses 4, 5 and 6, you'll see when it's talking about the battle with the Meccans, that you do attack those who have betrayed your treaty, except for those who uphold the treaty. It says you don't have anything to do with them. You don't attack them. If they uphold the treaty, you're in good terms.
What Jamie's talking about, though, is people who don't have a treaty with and who haven't attacked you. I think that's what he's referring to, that they were seemingly, from what I understand, allowed to attack people who had not attacked you and who didn't have a treaty.
Right. But that is in dispute. The Hanafi school does not teach that. He's not provided any quotes from any of the four madhabs of Hanafi, Shafi, Maliki and Hanbali. He's not quoted them. He's got a paragraph from a 14th century Damascene jurist who says all the four schools, they all teach. Well, I've not read that. So it's just a claim.
They agree that when unbelievers make a treaty, its terms should always be observed, except in the view of Abu Hanifa, who makes it a precondition that the terms must entail some benefit for the Muslims. If the benefit ends, the treaty is automatically abrogated. They agree that if a woman of the idolaters emigrates to Dar al-Islam and the ruler has agreed to a stipulation that if a Muslim enters his territory, he will return him to the unbelievers she has not returned. So yeah, it does mention treaties.
But not the quote you mentioned originally didn't mention.
Okay,
that's why it was misleading.
Or if you only look at it, yes, but like obviously like it's saying.
It's not obvious. You've got to quote it. Otherwise, you can't assume exceptions when you don't mention them. You've got to make it clear. The quote you mentioned gave the impression wrongly that Muslims are simply to attack non-believers, whoever they may be. That is false.
That is true. Where no treaty exists,
yes,
that's
but
true.
You didn't say that.
Will you admit that where no treaty exists, even if the non-Muslims haven't attacked the Muslims at all, the Imams agree that Muslims living in the frontier should attack.
I don't accept because I've not seen any evidence of that.
Well, this is evidence.
That's not evidence.
Why is it not evidence? It's a jurist. I showed you the quotes a few minutes ago.
You've got a paperback at Speaker's Corner in English, and I'm supposed to believe that.
Is this a forgery? Is the
question for you, Paul. What would it take to convince you?
Excellent question. Let me show you how I work. It's different from how you work. I'll show you because I'm funny like that.
For so long.
No, but you've not shown me evidence. I'll show you. This is how my funny mind works. Okay, when people make claims, they say Abraham Lincoln said X. They say, look, it says in my paperback he said X. I think, hang on. Okay, let me just check. I want to see written speech of what he said before I believe it. Because in my experience, maybe because I'm old and funny duddy, I'm finished. I haven't finished.
I see where you're going with this. Let's return next week once we both have the evidence of the actual original writings of the Imams.
Let me finish. I know from experience, from being a Christian as well as being a Muslim, that the first rule when it comes to these things is always check the sources. Always check the sources, because people make claims. They may be a 14th century jurist, wow, but I want to check it out for myself because I've been told lots of stuff which when I checked it out, I was told there's a Christian over there told me an hour ago, it says in the Quran that only men go to paradise and enjoy the fruits of paradise. And I said, well, show me a verse. And you said it was Surah 5, whatever. And I looked up in my Quran and it says the pious, the muqahin, the believers. It doesn't say men, it says believers.
Okay, so
and he acknowledged that what he said was wrong.
Okay,
good. Now, my point is this. I didn't just take his word for it.
Do you want to come back next week, or do you want to converse over email?
Just give me another 30 seconds. So my point is this. When a book makes a claim about what the founders of the four schools say, I personally, because I'm just funny like that, will not just take that as knowledge without checking it. And do you know, when I was at university, that's exactly what they told me. Always check the sources. Always check the sources, because often what we're told is not correct.
So you're going to do that?
So when you ask me why I don't accept it, because I've not seen the evidence. He says in his book, it says, oh, they believe that, but he's not actually quoted me the evidence. And that's how, if you're going to deal with me, that's how funny I am. I've got to see the evidence.
Okay.
And not just accept what you say because you read it in a paperback.
Okay, here's the thing. I asked you kind of like a long time ago, tell me a more authoritative source that disagrees with that. You didn't do that when I asked you. So clearly. Okay, but does that necessarily say anything about what the Imams actually agreed upon, though, in their interpretation?
No,
not really.
Yes, it does.
Because
let me explain to you how it does.
I can assure you it doesn't, because there are definitely verses in the Quran which justify this. Fighting is prescribed to you is one of the verses that they use to justify this outlook.
Because the four Imams, Abu Hanifa, was not dogmatic and who insisted that his view. He always deferred. He always said, if I'm wrong, check it by the Quran. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I'm saying the Quran does talk about honouring the treaties of those unbelievers. We have treaties with. Now, if it is the case, and I'm sure it's not, that Abu Hanifa disagreed with that, he'll be the first person when he was shown in the Quran it says that he would admit he was wrong. Because the authority that Abu Hanifa had was not Abu Hanifa, it was God and his word. The passage you quoted at the beginning and you held on to for 20 minutes does not say that. It doesn't allude to peace treaties with unbelievers. And it was only when I pressed you managed to find another chapter which qualified your opening paragraph.
There's a different heading about treaties.
Yeah. So you've got to find the original, I want you to find Abu Hanifa, Shafi, Maliki, I want you to show me where they say we must always attack the unbelievers or whatever it is you're claiming. And I'm personally sure you're wrong, but show me the evidence.
Okay, I will do that, but like as a little corollary, why do you think the onus is on me to do that?
Because you're making the claim.
No, but I have a jurist who wrote a published book that's well kind of reviewed by publishing houses and has been in like republication for a long time, and supporting what has just been said. So what is your reason for thinking that what he says is wrong? Because you haven't quoted any specific sources by Maliki, Hanafi, Shafi, and
you haven't quoted
Ahmad.
You said on hearsay on someone in a paperback who says, they believe that. Yes, but you see. In Islam, we don't follow scholars, we follow the evidence. We follow knowledge.
Ibn Taymiyyah says something, you don't think that gives you some reason to believe it?
Ibn Taymiyyah is not infallible.
True.
We always check what he says against the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet.
If you don't have any specific evidence that Ibn Taymiyyah or another scholar is wrong, don't you think it provides some evidence that stance is correct if they are stating that?
If they're saying something that's not backed up the Quran, then we're not obliged to believe it. We can believe it or not, depending on.
It depends on the interpretation.
We're only obliged to believe what is based on certain knowledge, which for a Muslim is always revelation.
Right, as I tried to say a bit earlier.
It's not just hearsay in a paperback. We need to say the original evidence. You see, that's not how Muslims do things.
Islam. Since you're not happy with my book of Islamic jurisprudence, we already know. But we'll come back and we'll look at.
I'm not happy with the way you're doing things.
We really already know. But like,
I want to explain why I'm not happy with the way you're doing this, because I know, having read books. Hang on, you're interrupting. I'm trying to talk.
You're interrupting.
I just want to say finally that if you read on this, you read it. I'm aware of a great number of different jurists' opinions, and even within one school, you can have a difference of opinion. To simply have one view of one jurist in 14th century Damascus, that doesn't mean it's Islam. It's actually laughable to think that somehow that's normative for Muslims today. That's not how it works.
Okay, but you haven't answered the question I asked you. What would it take to convince you?
Well,
take a jurist from every single school
convince what?
That what Jamie's saying is true. But what would you go? Okay,
I've never heard anyone scholar say this before. This is so weird.
Maybe because they're embarrassed about it.
No, that's, you see, this is where your Western Islamophobia kicks in, and you've got this kind of, the Muslims are covering over because of taqiyya.
Forgive me for
this is where you get
forgive
it.
me for having
I heard you
and
preaching.
worry
I heard you
about
preaching.
Kind of an ideology that thinks you should make war against, like, non-Muslims on the frontier. Oh no, go no. Okay, we'll look at the actual evidence, but like we aren't going to do anything.
You haven't presented any words by Abu Hanifa or Shafi you haven't presented a single quote. So, but until you do, there's no debate to be had. Because we're not dealing with evidence, you're dealing with second-hand 14th century Damascene jurist opinion, which may or may not be accurate. And your trust in one dude is touching, but it's not Islamic. That's not how we do things.
The thing is, like you've tried to put the onus on me to find higher evidence. I could equally put the onus on you to show that this scholar is incorrect. I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to be so lazy, and I'll relish looking at Malik's Muwatta and Abu Hanifa's original writings and showing that this jurist actually is correct. I have read books on this subject before, and your view of quoting one scholar would be laughed at in a context of Islamic scholars. That's not how Muslim scholars do their fiqh when it comes to the rules of war. It's simply not how it's done. No, the reason why I got this book is because it's quite helpful in that it's a comparative book of fiqh, and it gives the summary of what each of the four surviving schools thinks.
In the opinion of one man.
No, he's a qualified man. At the end, anyone is one man.
There are 1,000 qualified one men who one can refer to who don't necessarily agree with him. Is this naive trust in one guy you've come across who it seems to reinforce your preconceived ideas about Islam being a violent religion that attack unbelievers?
Okay, but I've asked you for specific sources that disagree, and you haven't told me.
Okay, well, I'm about to tell you now.
That'd be great.
I'm about to tell you now. Now, there is a book, you can actually download it for free on the internet. It's called War and Peace in Islam. I can't remember the publisher it is, but it's online now. It's written by a whole bunch of contemporary.
Is he one of the original scholars?
Original what scholars?
Is he one of the original imams? We're talking about what the original imams believed. Surely, I thought you were going to quote me one of their writings. Why should I believe this 20th century dude if you don't believe a 14th century jurist?
Right. Well, let me just finish. You interrupted me. So the book I'm referring to is a book by the leading scholars and academics of the Muslim world, including some Western scholars, and they discuss the original sources, including the four schools, and quote from them, and also from the Sahaba and the Quran. And I recommend that book. It's quite a thick volume, War and Peace in Islam, but it represents mainstream Sunni opinion. And I can tell you the views that you're reflecting now have absolutely nothing to do with mainstream Islamic opinion. You've got a view which you clutch to, and then you.
Isn't mainstream.
How you define Salafi is actually the view of the four madhabs, that we always go back to the earliest sources. We don't just make up things as we go along. There's a normative tradition that goes back to the Sahaba and to the Prophet and to the Quran. That is you won't find any mainstream Muslim disagreeing with that. The Sahaba put a special emphasis on that, and over against any later traditions. This is true, but in terms of a creedal thing, all Muslim scholars who are Sunni agree you go back to the Quran, the Sahaba, and the four schools. That's just normative Sunni Islam, unless you're a Shia. But this is mainstream Shia. So the book I'm referring you to, by the top scholars who are expert in this, who do quote the sources, they reach very different conclusions than you do. And these are experts who know the Arabic. And these are the people I look to, not some guy with a paperback who's from the 14th century one scholar. That's not Islam. I keep on saying this, but one day you'll discover this.
Well, you don't actually have your book, which you claim says that thing here. I actually have my evidence here. Maybe we should come back next week.
You have not quoted a single quote
when we both
from
have
the
our
Sahaba.
evidence, like from the four imams, we'll see what the four imams believe, and we'll do that next week.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Oh, about the error in the Quran. I mean, do you have what's the word?
Not really.
No. I was going to ask, do you have stamina for that? Is that something you'd enjoy doing? I don't want to
What's the error in the Quran?
Okay.
Give me the quote.
So
we're going to quote from the Arabic, of course.
Surah 4.
You're going to quote from the Arabic, of course.
I'm not going to quote from the Arabic.
Okay.
I've
already
read...
one problem. We're not quoting from the Quran. We're quoting from an English translation.
Okay, but I've read.
It's a mathematical thing.
I've read English tafsirs.
This is an important methodological point. People think it says the Noble Quran. It actually says interpretation of the meanings. There's no Arabic. I could throw this on the floor and walk away, and no Muslim could say I was doing anything terribly wrong. because this is not the actual Quran. It really matters that you really understand the original
You
language.
want that
This is the view of Muslims. The Quran is in Arabic. It's not any translation. So no, we're not looking at what it actually says. If we're not quoting from the Arabic.
Are you that scared to look at the meaning of the Quran?
I'm trying to establish. I'm trying to train you in how to think Islamically about how we.
No, it sounds like you're like already creating excuses. In case.
I'm trying to introduce you to how we see this book. We don't just open up any old English translation and say, the Quran says.
No, I've read tafsirs on this as well, and it says the exact same thing. They just paraphrase it. It's not like it's not a figurative text. It's a very straightforward, meat and potatoes piece of text.
What, the Quran?
No, this verse I'm about to quote.
Okay. But the point I'm making is an important point about before we jump to English translation. No, you see, you've got no patience to learn about Islam. You just want to prove your point. You don't want to learn. Yeah,
well, okay. I think I'm right about this.
Hey, what's your verse?
Okay, so it's in Surah 4, verse 11, ayah 11 and 12. And I guess you're about to read it yourself now.